Thank you, James. Suhail always makes for riveting listening, and I think his diatribe is well intentioned. But I'd like to make 2 or 3 points to you because obviously there is much that is wrong in our democracy, and obviously there is need for correction. But I think even though this may sound cliched, we should be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is a country which is an ancient civilization but a young republic. 65 years in the journey of a young republic seems long for those who are part of the process at the moment, but it's not the end of the day. And there are problems in our democratic functioning which need serious course correction and reform. But I believe democracy is essential for this country. I believe for all its faults, it has led to the gradual empowerment of those who were earlier excluded from the process of decision making. I believe that there is need to improve that form of democracy, and that will happen over a period of time if the people participate in that process of reform. But today in particular, for a conference like this, it's important to remember that a situation has developed which was not envisaged by our constitution makers. Our constitution makers, well-intentioned, thought that the process of elections, however flawed the process may be, would lead to one party with a stable majority which would have 5 years to rule and give back to the people what the people had voted them in for. Now, for the last 20 years, you've noticed that instead of having a party or perhaps a party or two with a stable majority which can govern, we are talking of governance which is synonymous with development, which can govern for the next 5 years and bring to the people tangible results. Instead of that, as you are all aware, we have multi-party coalitions ruling at the center where 22 or 24 parties come together. The system is inherently unstable and the majorities are precarious. So I want you to follow this point, because when governments are unstable and precarious, all energies go to political management and survival, and not to the primary task of governance. The second outcome of this is that when governments are unstable and majorities precarious, the natural temptation is to resort to populist measures which may have an impact in the short run rather than enduring and long-term solutions. So we have a situation where we have a government, but the government is engaged almost predominantly in ensuring its management and survival, and is adopting policies which it is aware will not make an impact at the ground level in foundational terms, but is incapable of pursuing anything else because it's not aware about the longevity of its own existence. Another alchemy happens to the opposition. The opposition is meant to be a constructive pillar which provides that degree of critique to government which enables the government to improve upon its policies and adopt those policies which are best to give back to the people what they have voted this government to. But when the opposition senses that the government is precarious, its entire approach becomes predatory. In other words, the opposition is not then taking up an issue on its merits, but on the possibility of that issue embarrassing the government or perhaps threatening its survival. So the entire edifice as conceived becomes unstable. Now this is the crux of the issue today, and the problem, apart from all the criticisms that Suhail has made, which are largely valid, some adjectives could have been eschewed, but in spite of all those problems, we have to understand the basic paradigm. Governance or development without democracy has serious dangers of becoming authoritarian. And democracy, without being able to yield to the people the fruits for which the people have reposed faith in a government, in a sense, devalues the system as a whole. Both are essential. Both are two sides of the same coin. The challenge before India is, can we find some methodology by which the functioning of democracy is not antithetical to development, but for all the flaws that democracy has, can it still yield that kind of dividend? This is the challenge. There are many solutions. I discussed some in my latest book, Chanakya's New Manifesto. All of us need to think. All of us need to think. For instance, if, for instance, coalitions were required by the Election Commission to identify themselves prior to an election, and if further the Election Commission required such a pre-identified coalition to work out a workmanlike governance and development agenda, and if this was then taken to the people, and if such a coalition came to power, because it has identified itself prior to the election, because it has pledged itself to a common working development and governance agenda, if the constitution is amended to say, once you come to power, no constituency of that coalition can withdraw support for the next 3 years. I pose to you, I am not saying support this or not. We have to think of solutions, because otherwise the next election will be worse. Now, I compare this often to the anti-defection law. In a sense, the anti-defection law is an infringement of absolute democratic rights. If I am an elected representative and I don't like a party, I should be allowed to leave. But precisely because of the peculiar circumstances of India, the amendment was made that unless there is a certain critical mass of people wishing to leave a party, you can't leave it, because there was so much horse trading going on. So we have devised, in the context of India, certain solutions which to some extent become workable. Can we do that with coalitions? Because it's very obvious, no single party is coming with an absolute majority in the foreseeable future. But we need democracy to function for development. So what should we do? How do you ensure that coalitions that come do not totter from day to day, but have 3 years of stability at least, in order to take up policies for development where they are not afraid that their decisions will tomorrow make the government fall, or where the entire functioning of a government is held hostage to one constituent of that coalition? By the way, I am not against coalitions. I'll take 2 minutes more. I am not against the proliferation of parties. In a sense, the Banyan rule of the Congress party ended to allow far more democratic voices to be expressed through coalitions. I was once in one Prime Minister's office where the government had a majority of 1. And there was one member of that coalition, a party which had only 1 member. So no decision was made without listening to that one member of that coalition, and he came from the Northeast and was otherwise completely unaccustomed to be consulted in the manner he was being. So it is not that coalitions are wrong. Democracies evolve, there are new voices, there are regional aspirations, there are local leaders, they can form parties. The problem is not that, the problem is how do you make such coalitions work when they come together post an election as part of a government. All of us need to think, because unless you resolve that, it's very, very difficult to ensure that the two concepts don't become opposed to each other, governance and development. Let me say at the end, there are other countries who have, because of circumstances of their country, adopted, modified, changed, reviewed the functioning of their democracy in the context of their own circumstances. It is not possible to transplant some other system in its entirety in your country. You have to be able to evolve mechanisms by which, given your circumstances, a particular form of government or democracy functions. One thing is clear, the people of India cannot wait for too long. And for all the ills that Suhail talked of in democracy, I want to ask, why is it that the parliament has not fulfilled its promise of convening a special session on electoral reform? Electoral malpractice is the beach of corruption in India. And there are small measures that can make big changes. For instance, you have a law that parties need not name donors if the donation is below 20,000 rupees. So strangely, a particular party in UP, its statement of accounts, because their accounts are not vetted by a professional chartered accountant appointed by the Election Commission or a panel appointed by the Election Commission and the CAG. When it gives its statement, you find that the income of the party, the revenues of the party have grown from 5 crores to 300 and some crores, and they claim that 290 crores has come as 19,919 rupees by an unnamed donors. The Election Commission has recommended 6 times by now that this law needs to be repealed. All transactions, to the extent possible, needs to be done through banking channels. There are far more improved systems to digitally track financial transactions. Penalties need to be put in place on those who infringe, including deregistration of a party. All parties' accounts should be put on a website, and the financial transparency of parties should come under the RTI. So there are incremental ways of trying to pursue reform so that democracy and its functioning ceases to be such a barrier in development. Can India rise to that challenge? For all the faults of democracy, I, for one, cannot say that we can do away with it, because I have seen, Suhail has seen, you have seen the kind of empowerment it has given to hitherto exceptionally neglected and oppressed segments of our country. It gives them a voice. They know that they can get from the ballot box what the system will not otherwise yield. It cannot be done away with, but we need to have a revolution in the way it functions. Thank you.